Hey guys, welcome back to Star Wars Timeline. Today we have an interesting topic of discussion. This is our improvised Boomer Council. Brian and I are going to talk about the Star Wars fandom, now versus then, how two different generations of fans interact with our friends and family and people on social media, and social media aspect of it is also going to be a big part of this podcast. But before we get there, Brian, please introduce yourself. Let us know where your channel's at. What is your whole shtick? What was the idea behind the channel?
Sure. My name is Brian, and I am currently trapped here in Barb's basement. Me and my good friend Zach, we've known each other since we were 12. His mother has forcibly trapped us here in the basement, where we're forced to read Star Wars content until she deems that she's full. Right. And the unfortunate part for us is that Star Wars content is still being made, so it seems like we're just stuck here forever.
I sort of feel bad for you guys, but not really.
Yeah, but our channel name is Barb's Basement. We do live streams. We make shorts content. We're got some long form content in the way, but yeah, that's our whole shtick.
Yeah. So it was interesting how we started interacting because I saw you guys live stream and I listened in and I just had to say hello in the comments and you said, "Oh, it's Star Wars Timeline." With all this guy, I'm like, hold on a second. My channel is known to somebody. What is going on here? And it's just your casual conversation with your buddy kicking it. I swear, man, I felt like I'm sitting there in the basement with you and just hanging out and having a good time. Something that I have missed doing due to what we've all experienced during the last 2 years, doesn't need to mention, but also because there's a cultural shift with the rise of social media, which we'll get into. But it was just so nice to hear two friends kicking it and having a good time. Brian, what is your first memory of Star Wars that you remember and cherish?
Yeah, so my first memory that I have of Star Wars is when you were speaking earlier, you were talking about the two generation of fans. I really feel like it's three generations at this point. It's like original trilogy, prequel, then sequel. But the first thing that I remember is my mom has always been a massive Star Wars fan. She's one of those people that she just loves everything Star Wars. Like she has no negative thoughts about Star Wars at all. So my first memory of just the franchise overall is when they were re-releasing the original trilogy in theaters before the prequels came out. I went to go see those and just immediately fell in love. Like I have some pretty severe ADHD. So like, it's like one of those things that I hyper fixate on is Star Wars I got a taste of it and it just never left my brain. So it's like that. And then weirdly enough, like the special edition Mountain Dew cans for the prequel trilogy when they came out. That's one of the things that really, and the merchandising was already on point at that point in time.
Yeah, you know what? It's a point of discussion all the time on my podcast. It's prequel fans reminisce. I mean, I was 19 at the time. I have very vivid memory of it. But from a child's perspective, a huge part of it was not just a movie. It's everything around it. It's the culture around it. For example, here in New York City, dude, wherever you went, like McDonald's or Burger King, like different outlets, they have like either little tiny toys, or you could buy like glasses, you could buy like you said, soda cans, and or a cereal, you could potentially win like a chromium picture or tickets to see the movie. It was all over the place, and such a wonderful time for kids to enjoy it. And you very pointedly mentioned that there is now 3 generations of Star Wars. And I'm sort of in between. I'm not really an original generation and neither a prequel. I was born in 81, and I was in 87, 6 years old, going on to 7, living back in Russia when my dad brought them on VHS tapes. And to me, it was just one single experience. We watched them with like cheaply dubbed Russian translation. Oh, Chewie! I'm like, what are they saying? Hold on a second. That was the experience, and it was just one thing. And the only questions we had, like, hey, is there ever going to be more? And this is, guys, where we get into the first major topic of our discussion of experiencing Star Wars fandom now versus then. And you once again, you mentioned very well and said that there's 3 generations of fans. In 1977, A New Hope literally started a global phenomenon overnight, just like this. But it was not always in the spotlight. There were decades of quiet. It's just a refresher reminder to us all, because it was not always mainstream. After the original trilogy was over, no one imagined or knew that we're going to get any other Star Wars, because logically, Luke Skywalker's journey comes to an end. And here comes the director 15 years after, and he said, you know what? George said, I'm not done with this franchise yet. Let me do another trilogy. And now it has passed hands, and Disney said, well, it's part of the American pop culture. We can't stop now. But I'm just pointing it out that in between, it was a big, big question mark. So, Brian, what is so special about this franchise? Why do fans keep coming back?
I mean, for me personally, it's always just been a thing where, like, I think that I really enjoy fantasy, like novels and
Mm-hmm.
whatever. If I've been reading like A Way of Kings, which is like a Brandon Sanderson novel, uh, I really like that fantasy aspect of it. So I think a part of it is it's just something that I was introduced to as a kid. It was like the
Mm-hmm.
first like real fantasy epic that I had like any interaction with,
Mm-hmm.
and it's almost like a comfort food for me. It's like it feels like when I'm in that universe reading a book or reading a comic book, it's like your grandma making you like your favorite meal. Like
Right.
it feels like a warm blanket, especially
Mm-hmm.
over these last couple of years. It just feels like a safety net kind of.
Yeah.
But I think the reason why Star Wars resonates with so many people is because it can paint with such a broad brush. Like it can hit so many. I mean, no matter where you sit, like religiously, politically, no matter where you are, Star Wars doesn't like it. You can glean some form of lesson out of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's my whole thing, and I think that's why it's just stayed in the zeitgeist of the planet for so long. Is it's
Mm-hmm.
I would kind of compare it to like the Marvel of its day. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
like when a new movie came out, it was like a cultural event. It wasn't. It was
Mm-hmm.
like the Super Bowl. Like everyone was a well. I guess everyone in the world's not really that concerned about the Super Bowl, but you get what I
Mm-hmm.
mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it started this revolution in cinema, not because necessarily it was a revolutionary idea. It was executed in a pretty revolutionary manner as far as filmmaking and
Oh yeah.
cinematography is involved. But we had epic, fantasy films, and we had science fiction movies before that time, which were also considered like a world classics. But with it, I think it brought that escapism idea that
Mm.
as a kid, as a child, you could lose yourself in it and not be part of this world. And even as adult, you tap into your inner child, and for a time, you disassociate with all the woes of adult life, like and hardships of
Hmm.
life, and say, like, you know what, let me go travel to this place. Whether you're interacting with it through movies or picking up a book or checking out your Star Wars video game, I'm playing Jedi Outcast. It's one game that I constantly start and restart over a decade and can't manage to finish. I don't know what sort of mental disorder that is. I just started over, but it's that idea that's like, hey, when things don't feel kind of like bright enough, I always I can go to Star Wars. But
Hmm.
how would you generally describe the Star Wars fans of your time when you were experiencing Star Wars for the first time versus this current generation?
Um, the way that I would describe it is there's definitely obviously when we were all younger, like when the Phantom Menace like first came out, there wasn't any like major social media. There was like
Hmm.
nothing outside of like internet, like chat rooms and stuff like that, which was in its like really early days. So I knew there was negativity around those things. Like I knew that there was people out there who didn't like the prequels, but
Right.
I didn't really experience that much. Like I didn't like meet anyone or speak to anyone who really was like overtly negative about the prequels. Because everyone who I talked to about Star Wars was like in my age group. But the one thing that I will say about like my generation of Star Wars nerd is when I was like very nerdy about it, it was not cool to be a massive nerd. Like it was not something that was like acceptable in society. So I would be afraid to talk to people about it. Like there was another kid in one of my classes who was reading the Revenge of the Sith novel like just before the movie had come out. I believe just before the movie had come out. And I was like, oh god, I want to talk to this kid so bad, but I like didn't want other people to know that I was like obsessed with Star Wars. So I would say that it's become more acceptable. I mean, because everyone's a nerd now. It's just like part of pop culture. It's just in the like the way of life now is that a Marvel movie comes out, everyone goes and watches it, everyone's aware of it. And if you're not, people are like, that's weird. Like you've never seen a Marvel movie. Like it's impossible to have gone this far in your life with never seeing like a Star Wars or a Lord of the Rings or a Marvel movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally get you. If you guys hear something, a little bit background noise behind me, I do apologize. This is New York saying hello. It can't not intervene in my podcast. Like whenever I talk with people and do these recordings, you can hear it, right?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. Okay, whatever. We're gonna swing it, man. Screw this.
Yeah.
Star Wars. It's important. It's on the agenda. Yeah, I would also describe, and we'll talk about the differences of fans today versus before. But in general, I would say always fans were passionate and obviously nerdy. That's like a must for a Star Wars fan. You got to be into it. It's used to be a niche thing once upon a time, even though it's a global phenomenon. It's like a conundrum. Like, wait a second, everybody knows about it, but you're still a nerd for liking it. Yeah, pretty much. And I would say that fans are also very, very loyal, and this is why they get also very grumpy when things are not done the way that they want them to go. And it's like I mentioned before, it's also films for children. That's how George Lucas intended them, even the original trilogy. And this is what all of the fans channeled throughout the decades, like that inner child. You don't go into Star Wars expecting the political drama of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
right. It would be silly to expect that. It's different set of expectations. It's different set of action because you have something like Deadpool, like completely blatant gore and action, or something like Martin Scorsese would do, right? Like criminal dramas. It's not on the same level. You go into Star Wars expecting something very specific, and when it's not given to you, this is where fans show their true colors and say, this is not for me, this is not true Star Wars, and so forth.
Yeah, like I would definitely say that there's like almost like a sense of ownership by like each generation of Star Wars fan.
Yeah.
Is when it's so ingrained like in your personality and like what you do, you feel like a sense of ownership over that property. And then when you feel like it's not going the way that you thought it was going to go, it almost feels like they're doing wrong by you.
Yeah.
And I know that's like how I'm a huge expanding universe guy. Like that was my Star Wars. And so I know that when Disney got rid of the expanding universe, and this has been talked about to death, but we might as well talk about it again. I mean, it felt like a close relative of mine had died. Like it was like legitimately like a depressing day. Like when they wiped out the expanded universe, I was just like, man, this feels like so like just like the kind of like that sinking feeling in your chest. But yeah, definitely fans. The reason fans of anything, anyone who's in a fandom of anything, every fandom has some form of toxicity to it. There's always some subgroup who's like a salt miner, like people who are just out there to talk about the negativity of it, I guess. And so we've just made the decision we've gotten those feelings out. We've talked about them to one another. So it's like, why just like keep being angry about something, I guess.
Right. It's constantly will evolve. It's constantly will shift. Like all art forms, so long that an art form or an art piece are part of the current conversation, they're alive. If the piece becomes immortalized, embedded in its time, nobody cares about it anymore because people don't have a modern context, modern take on it. It's like, okay, whatever. Whatever those ancient Greeks tried to tell me with those sculptures, if it wasn't relevant or poignant today, like people would not care about it. It's like I would forget that stuff. But it's a really funny how you describe it. I also talk about this all the time on my channel so I've and that's not to like flag that I know anything better than any other Star Wars fan, or I'm more privileged to care about the expanded universe. But I've been reading it more or less since I finished high school and started in college in 1998. Right, from Throne Trilogy. My first book was Truce at Bakura. It's like sitting right there on the shelf behind me. But when the announcement was made in 2012, by that time, I've had so much exposure to Expanded Universe. It's almost like listening to Metallica's Black Album 25 billion times. It's like, how much more of this can I get? And for me, don't get me wrong, I loved all of it. I ate it all up. And I'm not a very, very highly critical fan. I enjoyed most of the books. But there were like hitters there. There were some mediocre books. There were some books that were like, what the hell is this? Like, I don't like that. It was always on and off for me, right? Mostly positive. But when the change was announced, I was thrilled. I was ecstatic. I'm like, all right, so we kind of writing ourselves into creative corner here a little bit. Luke, Han, and Leia are in their 70s. They're still doing the same shtick, going through the same character tropes they did 20-odd years ago. Like, come on, let's move away a little bit from Skywalker Saga, do something different with it. Oh, yeah. And I was excited, thrilled with the idea. I'm like, okay, fresh blood, fresh new creators. Just like I always knew in my heart of hearts, like Final Fantasy VII Remake would eventually get its remake. It was inevitable. It's iconic part of RPG community. Same with Star Wars. It was bound to happen. And I was very, very receptive to it. I'm like, okay, let's see what they can do. Obviously, we're going to stumble along the road. It ain't going to be all perfect. It's
Oh
the
yeah.
nature your nature of creative field. Sometimes you get your bestsellers, Steven Spielberg, or sometimes you have your flops.
Hmm.
It's just an alchemical process that needs to happen. That the time is right. All the creative people come at the same time and they read carefully what the audience hungers for, not what they want. I want to underline that. Not what the audience expects, what they're hungry for. This is where Dune came in and said, how about a little bit of more cerebral science fiction? Boom. And the movie is like a global phenomenon. Not as big as Star Wars, but still, it's like made waves, right?
Yeah. Incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, I can definitely agree with you in the sense that I mean, I think that like a lot of people would be lying if they said they weren't excited about The Force Awakens.
Yeah.
That was like a huge thing.
Mhm.
And I guess like I am of like now that I've had like separation from when the expanded universe was ended to like now, I can definitely say that like you see a lot of people online who are saying stuff like, oh, they're not respecting
Right.
legends or not yada yada yada. I
Right.
feel like a lot of those people have not read legends. Like a lot of people who they just go to Wikipedia and like they have like read a bunch of stuff and they have like an appreciation for it. They're
Right.
now like saying like everyone pretends now they love the Yuuzhan Vong. Like let's
Yeah,
not.
a purist view. Oh my God, I just recently had a Twitter war. You might have noticed it if you were there. Twitter war, literally, which I did not intend to be. Sorry to cut you off.
No,
But
you're
yeah, it's
fine.
such a part. I'm like, why are you portraying expanded universe like it was all perfect, all unanimously uniform in its storytelling? You were no run on errors or inconsistencies. Dude, like, what are you talking about? Have you even read
Yeah,
the books that you're discussing?
that's uh that's like my biggest pet peeve is seeing people who clearly have never read some of these things
Yeah.
because I read the new Jedi Order. It's been a hot minute since I've read the entire thing because it's such a
Hmm.
long book series. But I read through all of Legacy of the Force. I read through
Right.
Fate of the Jedi.
Right.
Like I've read through all those things. So seeing EU fans, people, EU purists who are like pretending like all of these things were universally loved,
Right.
that's just not true. That's just
It's
straight
not.
up not a fact.
Yeah.
Uh, like I mean, every Troy Denning book. I don't mean to. I
I
don't
love
mean to
Troy
call him
Deeney.
out
Yeah.
specifically, but
Yeah. Hmm.
I've never read a book of his that I've enjoyed.
Hmm.
I've
There you go.
disliked
Yeah.
90% of Troy Denning books,
Hmm.
and I'm a Legacy of the Force apologist.
Hmm.
I enjoyed it when I read it. Didn't like Fate of the Jedi, but
Hmm.
there are things in the expanded universe that I love and that I don't like, and it's to me it's the same thing with Disney canon. Is there's
You're right.
things in Disney canon that I really enjoy, and there's things
Hmm.
that I like really think I'm just like ugh.
Yeah.
All right, do we really need to do that? But I
Yeah.
think that it was Star Wars was going to be redone, is going to be wiped out. The EU was going to go away regardless because George was going to make his movies.
Right.
So it was going to happen. But people
Yeah.
like kind of they have like a myth to that George
Yeah.
was going to like make EU movies.
It's that
That wasn't going to
tribal
happen.
tribalism where people need to band together to stand behind something and call it
Mhm.
theirs versus the adversity aspect of it versus evil Disney or wherever Kathleen Kennedy find her target and go against. I understand that innate impulse that is like embedded in our DNA to do that. But moving on with a bunch of questions that I wanted to ask. You just opened up a whole can of a discussion, Brian, that I would love to discuss with you, like the EU, right? But I wanted to ask you a couple of questions in regards to fans. So what are we gonna do next is I'm gonna pretend I'm Dr. Brown and you're Martin McFly. If you guys don't know the reference, you don't belong in this podcast. I'm sorry.
Yeah, for real.
I'm going to engage our DeLorean and, we're going to go back and look at our personal early experiences. Like we've
Mhm.
established, you and I were from two different age groups, two different generations of Star Wars fans. What are your childhood memories? Where did Star Wars movies sit on your pantheon of movies that you enjoyed?
I mean, if it gives you any indication, I had all six of the movies on VHS, and
Hmm.
like the I mean, Empire Strikes Back was just like unplayable basically anymore because like I'd watched through it so many times. I'm one of those people who can just like rewatch something over and over and over again. If there's like a YouTube video that I really like, if there's like a
Hmm.
podcast that I really enjoy, I'll listen to or rewatch those same things over and over again.
Hmm.
And Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, man, I really just like blew through those things a lot. So like for me, I know that Star Wars, like all of the movies are not perfect. Like I am
Mhm.
fully aware that they're not. I mean, they're like objectively like better made movies, but Star Wars for me is like the ultimate. Like it's like the franchise that I've kind of like shaped my whole, it's kind of depressing, but my whole personality around.
Mhm.
Like my
I
my
think it's a
wife
positive
who's
thing.
yeah, my wife who's only tangentially aware of most Star Wars stuff.
Mhm.
She knows all these EU characters. She knows all these things because I just never shut up about them. So I mean, my childhood was is just completely
Mhm.
engrossed by Star Wars media in general, just all of it. That's
Yeah.
like the that and skateboarding. Those are the two things that like are just ingrained in my brain
And video
from my
games.
childhood.
Video
Yeah.
games. Yeah, that was big for me. But when I was growing up in Russia as a kid, so I came to the U.S. in '96. I was 14 years old. My
Mhm.
younger brother was 8. Um, Star Wars never was exclusive to us. We are the kids. Yet I'm pretty sure you have an idea that most of the kids around the world grew up with Hollywood cinema. From
Mhm.
Goonies to RoboCop to Terminator to Back to the Future, we just talked about Indiana Jones. And Star Wars, I was always loved. I used to watch the 3 tapes back to back in a single day to a point where I knew every phrase and every shot and every angle of every single movie by heart, committed to
Oh yeah.
memory, right? But it was never the stuff. For
Mhm.
example, the original Clash of Titans to me was always as big, as momentous as Star Wars. There were other things that in that children's, toy box that I pulled from, like, oh, I like this, I like Ninja Turtles, I like Thundercats, I liked a lot of stuff, and Star Wars was a part of it. It's only when I came here and encountered celebrity worship and film worship as a thing of its
Oh
own,
yeah.
right? I started kind of like, oh yeah, yeah, I'm part of this too. I'm part of this tribe. I love Star Wars. I think I love Star Wars more than anything. It's kind of my thinking sort of evolved there a little bit, but
That's an interesting. I guess I
yeah,
never thought about that because like I mean that is like American culture is like celebrity, like you deify
right.
celebrities.
Hmm.
So like I know that's like America's number one export is entertainment,
Hmm.
realistically. So like yeah, I guess that's a really interesting take on that. That like it because like the 80s was like such a momentous time for franchise building. I feel like that's like when all of the major franchises like really took off. So
Hmm.
it's like you could be a fan of everything at that point in time.
Yeah. Brian, speaking to that childhood, when you were experiencing Star Wars and talking to those of your friends that also were like-minded and also enjoyed it, how do
Mhm.
you remember like kids or even adults around you speaking about Star Wars in general? Like, what were their comments? How did they react to an entire movie or just like talk about specific parts of a movie?
Sure. So I mean, my buddy Zach, his dad got him into Star Wars. My mom got me into Star Wars, and we had like that. We met each other like doing a seventh grade science project,
Hmm.
and I came over to his place to like make the science project, and he was like, "Hey man, you like Star Wars?" I was like, "Yeah, I like Star Wars." And he was like, "You should come look at my books." And I was like, "You should look at my books." And so both of our sets of parents were always very, there weren't like Star Wars fans how we were Star Wars fans, but they were like looking at it from like they were, kids in the 80s. They were like, "Oh, this is like this was like such a fun movie." Like my mom had like all of like these, it was either like vinyl records or like actual like a tape
Hmm.
of like the audio drama of episode 4, and she
Hmm.
would re-listen to that over and over and over again. So like the way my mom would talk about Star Wars is like I was saying, it was just all positive. Like no, there was like no negative comments.
Hmm.
She would go and watch episode 1 through 3. No, nothing negative to say about them at all. Like nothing like how you would think of it
Hmm.
today. Like episode 2 is probably like my least favorite prequel movie. Like it's the one that I've probably watched the least,
Hmm.
and I have like all of my criticisms of that movie. My mom's just like, no, I just love it. And
Yeah.
it's the same thing with Zach's dad. He's like, yeah, I just love it. I just love it all.
They
So
actually remind me of my dad, even though like
mm,
they're obviously from two different cultures, countries. He understands filmmaking. He's not the
mm,
type of guys like that look at the surface level of cinema. I'm pretty sure your parents and your friends' parents are as well. People understand generally what they're watching. It's just
yeah.
he's never nitpicky. He's like, oh yeah, yeah, I liked it. And like I showed him
Mm,
Aquaman. He's like absorbs everything DC and Marvel. Like, you like this one? Yeah, I liked it. Dad, did you like that one? Yeah, I liked it too. Like, which one you didn't like? Like, I like it all. It's like, it's amazing.
Exactly.
To him, it's just the thrill of it that these kind of movies are being made today. It's so exciting. But I remember in my generation, I'm going to go way back to Russia, when we were talking about Star Wars on the street, it was never amplified to this entire movie is garbage or this entire movie is amazing. It is always like, hey, I like this part. Yeah, I didn't like that part. The concept of spoiling things for friends was non-existent because you didn't watch a film for its conclusion. It's like, oh yeah, this happened at the end. It was like, oh really? I'm going to go check this movie out. It's always back and forth. It's always an exchange of idea. It's never like, hey, I know what I watched. I know Star Wars better than you, and it was all great then, and it's not great now. Like, it was never of that kind of like antagonistical language where we're just like very, very much what I heard you guys speak on your podcast. I'm like, holy crap, hold on a second. Let me tune in on this. Like, people actually have a conversation about Star Wars. We need a little bit more of that. And I think this has been a major, major shift in social media, which we'll get to that topic. But
I guess that's like kind of not to deviate too much, but that's like our whole outlook on it is there's room to have something. Doesn't have to be literally the worst or literally the best. Like we enjoy the fun of Star Wars. For us, like our generation is talking about it. That's like, it's just like experiencing it, discussing it. There's no need to like talk about like any of the political stuff that might be going on in the back end. Like we don't engage in any of that nonsense. So for us, it's just, we want like our live streams, our podcasts, anyone who's coming in to watch the channel at all. We just want it to feel like you're having a conversation in your friend's basement. Like as a kid, you're just talking about the thing, and you might like debate some of the topics or whatever, but it's never like you're literally the worst, or like this is like I am like the we're all anti that stuff here.
Yeah. That's awesome to hear. And just to give you an example, you know, how it's important to retrospect, kind of like look back at things. So I kind of endeared prequels, which I was hugely disappointed with them as an original fan. I felt let down. It was such a hard time trying to defend those movies, convince myself I like them, convince others that they're not terrible. And to this day, I disagree that they're terrible movies. They're just not very good movies. Like, okay. I just saw in my preparation for Kenobi episode 2, and I will admit here, guys, I don't remember liking it as much as I liked it this time. It's a flawed film. It's a deeply flawed film, but it has so many cool things going for it. And especially when you look at the larger canvas of the story outside of films, like expanded universe, the books, blah, blah, blah. I love it. I cherish it now. I love what it stands for. But Brian, we're back in The Mandalorian. I'm like using that shift sticks, punching and dialing up numbers, and we're back to the future, to 2022. How do you find the conversations now versus comparing it to past? Like, what are fans saying now? How have the sensibilities changed?
So I'm like one of those freaks who can just like be in any like Discord, like in our comments, kind of doing whatever. So I'm like, I try to be like pretty involved in like the Star Wars online community in general. And the discourse online is just, it really, really shifted. Like obviously when The Last Jedi came out, and all of a sudden, this is going to be a weird example, but flow with me here. So I liken it to professional wrestling fans. I grew up in the South of America, not South America, but I grew in the South of the United States.
Right.
So pro wrestling was ingrained in my life. Like it was real. Ric Flair was God. That was just how it was. But at some point, it shifted from people being fans of like the actual display of professional wrestling, and it started being fans were more interested in like the backstage goings on, like the drama of like they were more interested in like people's like wrestlers' contracts and like who was getting fired, who was like, you know, quitting the companies or whatever. It became like because like there is like real life issues there for pro wrestlers it's a very dark industry. So people got fascinated with that. And I view that the Star Wars fandom has had that shift where they're no longer interested in talking about like the actual lore. And a lot of people, they just want to talk about how Kathleen Kennedy is going to be like thrown into the sun any day now. So the online discourse around Star Wars that's like my biggest pet peeve is I want people to, we can have conversations like this, obviously, but like if you're sole purpose for like your subreddit existing, for like your Discord existing, is purely just to talk about what you dislike, what's really the point of that community, you know? So online discourse has definitely shifted to be like a lot more combative. It's like
Mhm.
political parties or like religious ideologies now. It's like two my era of Star Wars is better because I still see people like original trilogy exclusive fans that are like the
Right.
prequels still suck, and
Right.
then prequel fans saying the sequels suck. So I think people should just remember that every new set of movies, there's a new generation of fans. There's a new generation of people who are going to think that your movies are boring or whatever. So yeah, online discourse it's not always fun, but I'm one of
Yeah.
those people who likes to get in there and kind of mix it up without being toxic, I guess.
Mhm. I think you're had very very interesting points, and I think partially it's understandable because I always try to come from an angle of understanding, like why is this, why is that. I like
Mhm.
analyzing things. I like to figure out the psyche, like what why is this, why people act in such manner.
Mhm.
And it's always a clash of generations of old versus new. Back in the days, we had it
Yep.
better. Like boomer talking right here. Uh, uh, um, and it's also the social climate, it's also the political climate, it's what's happening
Mhm.
here, what divide us culturally. It translates into cinema because art reflects culture. it,
Yep.
it cannot exist in its own bubble. When people say I want no politics in Star Wars, stop that Disney agenda or representation or LGBTQ blah 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 blah, it can't exist in isolation, guys. I'll say it like a mantra over and over again. It
Yeah.
will not, George Lucas created, and yes, once again, he created the original film as a commentary on the Vietnam War, right? But at the same time, politics are still there. Politics are a part of the story, and then it kind of works. But when you just use the film as your trampoline, as a platform to express your political views, that's a whole different can of worms I don't even want to open because it's an entirely
Yeah.
different discussion there. But I do feel that there was a shift, and it's a little bit back and forth because it's a generational thing. Because like you and I
Yeah.
was said, there's fans who feel a sense of just entitlement. It has like, hey, I spent so many years with it. Why is it this way now? But how has the technology dramatically changed how we process entertainment? Star Wars.
I mean, like, like you were saying, like earlier when we were talking about Twitter, you were like, just don't even do it. Just like, don't even get on it. Um, I think that Twitter just like made it really easy to polarize or to like otherize like somebody who disagrees with you, like in
Mhm.
any leaning, any fandom, anything that you're a part of. It
Mhm.
makes it very easy because the anonymity of the internet makes it really easy to like insult somebody else.
Yeah.
And like to kind of go back to your last point about art not being able to be separated from real life, like that's something that I think that people kind of forget, is that the original trilogy and the prequels are very political movies. Like they
Yeah.
are. I mean, George was like a pretty like left-leaning guy. Like
Hmm.
he was anti-Vietnam War. The
Right.
prequel trilogy was about like the Bush administration. Just like when you're a kid, that's not your primary focus on those movies. Like you're not thinking about, oh, how was the Iraq War like influencing? That's not on your mind at all.
Hmm.
So I think that like kids that are growing up now watching the sequel trilogy, they're not thinking that it's about like whatever like agenda people think that it's really about. Because like
Hmm.
Hollywood's always had an agenda. Like let's get real.
Yeah.
Like it's always been that way. But technology has I don't mean to make it all negative, because there are definitely pockets of fandom online that are super positive. Like that's the
Hmm.
reason why I like your stuff, Star Wars on High stuff. Like I appreciate communities that are not just here's the latest thing that I'm outraged about. It's I'm actually going to talk about the lore and why I liked or disliked some of these things, and we're going to have a discussion about it.
Right.
So at the same time, it's divided people, but it's also brought like positive people, like people who like actually like the things they're talking about. It's brought a lot of those people together, and that's the stuff that I like to see. I like to
Hmm.
see like comment sections where they're like, "Oh, this is the thing that I loved about Jason Solo's journey, like in this book or whatever." And yeah, it's definitely it's a poisoned well a little bit, I feel.
Yeah. But I do feel that also we need to, part of positivity is being able to express something that is you dislike, a critique,
Mhm.
but how you express it, I also feel that it matters. It's also a topic that we'll get a little bit later on. But to me, when I was asking that question about how the technology has changed our outlook on Star Wars, and I'm going to turn on my inner boomer here as well. I grew up with internet. As internet was happening, this is where I was at. And what I have to recognize, at least in my mind, what made Star Wars special, the original 1977 film, is that there wasn't anything like it to compare it to. The market was not oversaturated with mind-blowing Marvel-verse, year after year, amazing films. The novelty of it is a great part of what makes those movies special. When you compare them to something like the academia considers, immaculate script or storytelling, a world cinema like Akira Kurosawa or Ingmar Bergman, Norwegian famous filmmaker, or Russian filmmakers, Star Wars is kind of a different topic. It's a different conversation. It's not an Oscar winner. The premise and the idea behind the film is entirely different. It's not to tap into high art form. It's a basic, simple myth, a modern myth translated onto screen. And that's why it's so timeless, because it is simple. It is easy to deconstruct. And the symbology of it could mean different things to 10 different generations to come. That's why it's timeless. But because it lived in a technological era of filmmaking back then in 77, it is drastically different how we process these movies today. We also have somewhat a bit of a spoiled generation that also became a part of it. Because you kind of like tune in to the wavelength of what the current people are experiencing, and you become part of it because you don't want to feel like you're left behind. And now we have an excess of entertainment, like I said, Marvelverse, right? And Star Wars, I feel like, and I talked about this with Josh on a podcast that I just recorded. It's going to come out later. But we talked about how the prequel kids who grew up with prequels and cherished them and loved them have experienced 20 years worth of comic book movies. Started with Sam Raimi's original Spider-Man, and now the Star Wars became diluted. And when the sequel trilogy started coming out, the excitement was nowhere near on the level of 1999. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was psychotic. People went nuts over it, man. Everybody's grandma was talking about Star Wars in an elevator. People had nothing to do with Star Wars were talking about it. It was insane. It was tangible. You could smell it and touch it in the air. With sequels, people are a lot more cynical, a lot more kind of like, let's see if it proves to be as good as my Star Wars, that kind of like demeanor. And also with rise with streaming services, I feel like on-demand entertainment equates to instant gratification. No, it's not up my alley. The arcane animation is not as good as in that show, or it's not the action or lightsabers in the visions is a little bit better. We get to compartmentalize now, and we get to pick and choose what we like because we have an excess of entertainment. What's next? What's next?
I would definitely agree with the like the instant gratification thing. It's definitely the rise of streaming services. I mean, like Christopher Nolan had talked about this a little bit, is that you're no longer viewing a film, like you're just experiencing content. And that's before we run out of time here on this call, but like I was saying that I was telling like my wife, we went to go see Doctor Strange 2, and I was like, yeah, I definitely saw a movie happen for 2 hours. Like it didn't feel like an experience to me. And I don't feel like there's a lot of movie studios out there these days that they're like, we're just making a film. It's going to be a film. It's meant to be experienced in theaters. Like the most I felt that way was with like the most recent Batman movies. I was like, this felt like a cinema piece. And like with Netflix and Hulu and all those other things, it's like you can just like watch a thing, consume it really quickly, and then all right, I'm on to the next thing now. Like you just don't have to sit there and think about it at all.
Yeah, excellent point. All right, Brian, before we move into the second half of this podcast, our next topic of discussion, social media interaction, I want to propose a theory here of my own, and I want your take on it. What do you think about this? Do you agree or disagree? Fans haven't changed, really. Star Wars fans have always been very, very passionately vocal. And the only difference now is that these voices are amplified through social media megaphone.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely in agreement there. Like it's like this is like the nature of fandom, is that it invites like debate, it invites arguments and like it. That's the whole. For me, that's like half the fun of it is the discussion of like which stories are good, which stories are bad, just as long as you're not like being like a total like dick about it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But it's like that's any fandom I've ever been a part of. It has literally always been that way. Like I promise everybody, you're not living in a time where a fandom is more divided. Fandoms by their very nature are divided. So there was never a point in time, like I agree with you 100%. It's like delusional to think that there was ever a point in time where everybody loves Star Wars.
Mhm.
I mean, post the prequel trilogy, I would say, like since like the dawn of like the internet age or whatever we're in now,
Mhm.
like it is not. It's been that way since like 1999. So like, let's just not pretend like the sequel trilogy is like that's what drove people into division because that was going to happen regardless.
Yeah. What I was very surprised to discover is that one older fan in my Facebook group pointed an article to me that I've read. Apparently, Empire Strikes Back was hated by a lot of fans when it came out. Why? Because it ended on a cliffhanger and it didn't give fans what they desire.
Mm-hmm.
Surprise. Big surprise. This is what part
Yeah.
of, like you said, it's part of the fun. But I'm now back in my Dr. Brown role. I'm jumping back into that DeLorean just to give you guys a little bit of perspective of how old and boring I am. So basically, I saw the rise of the internet, as I mentioned. We had AOL with that 56K modem that you could check out the sound of on YouTube, like and all that crazy
Yep.
stuff. So you could jump on your PlayStation 2 and play or Sega Dreamcast, play your video games, and get on your AOL service because you didn't have dedicated browsers, right? You had to go to AOL through that disk that you popped in your CD into your computer. And I encountered earliest internet, and with it, Star Wars fan forums.
Mm-hmm.
So, from your personal observations, Brian, how fans interact on social media? Like, how would you compare, like, Twitter versus YouTube versus Facebook, TikTok, wherever you're engaged in, you have a good kind of like appraisal of?
I mean, like man, I'm so like blind to like the Twitter stuff, but like YouTube, TikTok,
Hmm.
and Facebook, like I'm very well versed in both of in all three of those.
Hmm.
But I have like a very deep love for like those early like forums and like chat rooms and stuff like that for Star Wars because it's just such like a like this is gonna sound this is related. We'll get there.
Do it, man.
Like earlier, me and my wife were going to get coffee. Barb gave
Hmm.
me a hall pass to go out and get coffee, and we were listening to a My Chemical Romance album in the car, and I was like,
Hmm.
oh man, I'm just like remembering like being 13
Hmm.
and like going skateboarding and like what my hometown was like. Like that's also how I feel about like these early
Hmm.
places that people would gather to talk about Star Wars. But I feel like there's like the way that people interact on YouTube. Honestly, it's been a lot more positive than like I maybe necessarily thought that it would be.
Hmm.
On TikTok, it's just it can be a bloodbath over there. I'm not gonna lie, it can be like a real bloodbath. But on YouTube, like there's generally like even people who are exclusively EU fans and they like despise anything Disney. They've been like pretty like receptive to like the things that like we stuff we've been putting out. They're like, hey man, I don't love Disney, but this is a pretty good video. I'm like,
Hmm.
that's all I ask. Is just that like you're able to consume it. But yeah, it's I feel like we're living in like a like what we would probably say because I think that we both experienced the internet. I probably experienced it like at a pretty unhealthy age. You probably experienced it when you were like a lot more much you were more mature and could like actually grasp what people were saying.
Yeah.
And I was just like, God, I probably should not have been allowed on the internet at that age. But I think we're experiencing like this next generation's AOL. Like eventually
Great
YouTube
point.
and TikTok will probably go away or it'll be like absorbed and it'll become something else. And then people are going to be looking back fondly on these mediums and like how people used to like interact on these. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think it's YouTube is probably one of the best things to happen to Star Wars. I know that sounds very bizarre after everything I've been saying, but it's like a good place where if like you're fostering a good community, that community is going to be talking about Star Wars in the way that you would want them to talk about it. And even if you get negative comments,
Hmm.
it's easy to just kind of be like, all right, well, I took your comment for what it was. If you're
Hmm.
being a dick, then I'll just mute you from the channel. But if
Yeah.
you're being constructive and you're like, hey, these are the things I don't like about this,
Hmm.
I will, you will see me in our comment section. I'll be like, hey, you're just saying this sucks. How about instead of just saying it sucks, why don't you give me your reasoning behind why you don't like it
Yeah.
and present it in a respectful manner and we can have a conversation. And I feel like that's maybe something that people are like aren't used to experiencing on YouTube, where they're like, oh, wait a minute, like you're not just like telling me to like to go screw myself. Like you want to have a dialogue here.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the best things about YouTube in general, or Discord, is like you can like tell me without any being emotional about it, without being like, oh, Kathleen Kennedy, this or this and this and this, whatever. Tell me what about this story you don't like, and
Yeah.
we can like kind of discuss the merits of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I went off on a tangent there. But
No. It's awesome. It's fascinating to hear your thoughts, man. It's like there's a lot of stuff that I agree with, and a lot of stuff that I didn't even consider. And that's the whole point here, to have that conversation. I think we're going to jump on it a little bit later. I have a question posed for us, but yeah, it's the long form versus short form. So I started doing Twitter, which I hesitated for the longest time because it was like a dumpster fire of self-absorbed opinions and for some reason people like Gina Carano felt was a platform for free speech, and she prioritized her engagement with those fans over a career at Disney, and now she's not part of Disney, and everybody's pissed. I liked her in the Mandalorian. She wasn't anything extra special. The character didn't even have time to shine. She was kind of cool. She's in there, but now she's gone. Come on, girl. Like, you got it made for you. Like, you're there. Like, shut up and take the check and enjoy it. Have a good time. And by the way, I'm Jewish. Yeah. I'm a Russian Jew. She did not say anything offensive, and people still torched her. So I'm like, okay, let me figure out what this mentality is, just for my sanity, for my experimental purposes, figure out what this thing is. I started it. And Twitter is 280 characters. That's all you could say. And it amounts to, from my angle, nothing but vitriol. Because normal people don't talk in 280 characters, waiting for a response 2 days later from a faceless account with a little Spider-Man logo.
Anime profile picture.
Exactly. I talk, and then you respond. And then I'm courteous, and I'll listen to what you have. Sometimes I'm being an ass. I interrupt you, and then I say, I'm sorry, Brian. I interrupted your thought. Let's get back into it, right? That's what people do. Yeah. And it's so easy to take words out of context when I mentioned something about, well, you know, I'm happy that Expanded Universe books were there. I'm excited that they're done, and new generation of fans have to say something about the new content of Star Wars. And at the very least, the Expanded Universe books are still being reprinted, and I don't get to hear from these absorbed, entitled EU purists that their books are swept under the rug, because it's simply not truth. One girl took it out of the context, like I'm a Disney shill who hates prequels, even though I'm rewatching them. Right. And she takes it for a spin. You get that. Yeah, I don't want to get into it. I'm like, oh, okay, so this is what Twitter is for. That's what it does. Facebook is a little better. I enjoy having a group there. I enjoy having people there. And I specifically wanted to have moderators there who check myself as well. I don't want it to be about me, Benjamin's final word, and I feel like 16-year overlord, like, ha, 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 I just deleted this comment. Like, really? That's how adults act for, like, to feed your ego that you have a Facebook group? Like, come on, man, get real.
Exactly.
It's you want to share in on that hobby. So that was the Facebook experience for me. Like, you know what? Yeah, let's keep it going. I love creating memes where people get to pick their favorite characters. I mix and match. Because I always preach that I love both. I think both Expanded Universe and canon can coexist. I'll pick your favorite pilot. I'll pick like EU characters next to canon characters. Choose your favorite one. And of course, fans get into it. It's like, hey, why is Throne not there? Ben Solo is not a real Skywalker. It's not. People have a little bit of that, but still, I'm engaging them, and they're having fun, and they're snowballing it, and we have fun that way.
Exactly.
Brian, what is the balance between sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm reading from script here, guys.
No worries.
And I actually, by the way, I love the fact that we deviate a little bit and you take it for a spin, you take it in a little direction. That's what it's all about. You know, like,
I was telling you, it's like I can talk I could probably power a small city with the amount that I can talk.
Break rules. We are, you know what, maybe we're brothers from another mother, because I do exactly the same.
Yeah, for real.
You know, it's and that's this idea of social media that fans talk in extremes, you know. The Last Jedi was amazing. How dare you dislike it? Or, you know, or sequels are trash. If you consider otherwise, you know, you don't understand cinema. Why is that? Why people talk in extremes?
I love that argument because, like I was telling you, like I work in video production. That's like
Hmm.
my 9 to 5.
Hmm.
Shouldn't say I'm self-employed, so it's not 9 to 5, but you get what I mean. But when people tell me like, "Well, you don't understand the art of filmmaking," I'm like, "Really? I don't understand the art of filmmaking like that. I cannot." Wow, that's a very that's a unique take. That's certainly an opinion you have. But going back to like maybe some of like your Twitter stuff is that's what I enjoy about YouTube or like Discord for those communities is it's
Hmm.
not you're not just getting out like a tiny thought. And like that's like with YouTube Shorts, people will comment, they'll be like, "Well, why didn't you mention this or this?" I'm like, "Bro, I got 59 seconds to like get out this thought. So I can only get out so much." So like going back to like your stuff about the Facebook like polls and stuff like that, that's my favorite part about like our YouTube channel is like the community tab. It's
Hmm.
just being able to be like, hey, here's like a here which one's your favorite EU Jedi out of all these Jedi? Which like here's like one of our friends things that they just posted that we think everyone should go watch.
Hmm.
Stuff like because I feel like that's a better way to engage people than just for it to be like a nameless profile picture on Twitter.
Yeah. You don't want to alienate fans, and I think I make it a point once again. I make it. I try to be, dispassionate about it. Of course, I get into it sometimes. I get passionate. I'm a human being. I get with it with some fans. Hey, don't bash on sequels. Don't trash it.
Mm,
If you don't like it, go to a different Facebook group. I'm guilty as charged. I'm not perfect. I try to be inviting of other people's ideas and say, hey, like, come on over here. If you don't like something about a film like The Rise of the Skywalker, which is a deeply flawed film, to talk about it. This is your place to talk about it. Don't trash people who put their hearts and souls into it. And yes, people worked hard on that movie.
oh yeah.
Believe it or not, right? So it's talk about the art of it. Talk about what you are unhappy about, what Star Wars means to you. Draw something positive out of it. And I
Mm,
feel that people talk in extremes, especially today, is that I used to take it very close to heart because I'm a very passionate, highly opinionated person. But I'm also very retrospective. I understand where I step out of line. I'm like, oh, okay, Ben, maybe it was just playing on your ego here. Just shut up here. This person is trying to
yeah.
tell you something. Sometimes I fail. Once again, I don't present myself as a perfect human being. But I started realizing that a lot of these extremes is for fun. It's an outlet. People
Yeah.
needs to vent. People needs to vent and not have any sort of reprisal for it, lack of responsibility, or poke
Hmm.
somebody and have fun with it. Sometimes it's done maliciously. Sometimes like, I can't believe this kid is taking it. Like, pam, 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 and you keep pushing that button. And it's the
Yeah.
irony of it, an exaggeration. I'm like, oh, all right. So this is what social media is. Let's not blow it out of proportions. There are other parts where it becomes harmful, and we'll talk about this. But this is one part where I kind of like I understood the gist of it. After all, I remember AOL and your first chat messages when you're 16-year-old. Yes, that's how we try to date girls, dig up some girls, and all you
Yep.
see is a screen name and a pretty picture. You don't even know who's behind the screen. It could be a 40-year-old dude trying to do something crazy
Yeah,
there.
trying to
But
catfish
you're
you.
like, what is your name? Oh, your name is Alice. It's a beautiful name.
Hmm.
How old are you? It's like AOL. The first like smileys emojis we used to do. Man, that was
Oh my
crazy.
god, man, that's such a throwback.
I know. But how do you balance between stating a strong opinion, valid or otherwise, versus maintaining a civil discourse?
I found that because like I'm like a like I was saying, I'm a part of like a few different like Discord groups or whatever, or just even in our comment section is I find that if someone's like saying something just to be edgy, like
Hmm.
to like poke, like to prod, just like straight up asking them like, hey, like what's really funny about making fun of like a gay character? Like
You're right. Right.
what's funny about that? Like
Hmm.
explain the joke to me. And then I find that they're like, oh wait, like I can't really justify like why I don't like this.
Mm.
And so I find that like we want to be inclusive. Like we don't want to make anyone feel like they can't be involved in the conversation and stuff like that. But I found that like what's like maintained a civil discourse is being like, don't tell me your burning hot emotion in this second, your outrage that I wrote this thing. Tell me like what the merits are. And I find that's the way that like we have found balance in between somebody just being outright toxic and somebody being like actually having a civil discourse, like actually having a conversation,
Hmm.
is instead of like attacking that person for their opinion and being like, oh, you're like this and you're that, just being like, okay, but explain why. like get into the rationale behind the why.
The question
And
diffuses the impulse.
exactly. And then like I've had conversations with people they've talked about like diversity quotas and yada yada whatever. And like you said, like you're Jewish. My dad's full-blooded Native American, so I'm half Native. So I have seen very few areas of media where Native Americans are portrayed by Native Americans, and they're portrayed as like having their own culture and stuff. So like if somebody tells me like a diversity quota is like a bad, whatever, like I'll just like be like, okay, well, here's my perspective as someone who like is a minority, who's not really accepted by like, mainstream American culture. It's not quite accepted by Native American culture. Here's my point of view. So like, let's have a conversation on that. And I'm not attacking you. I'm not calling you big, nothing like that. I think that's like the best way to maintain because like we were talking about Twitter is like everyone's so used to being like at each other's throats because of just like the nature of the internet. So I'm hoping that even if we have people who are more extreme that like join our community, that we can temper their anger a little bit and maybe bring them down a couple of levels and be like, let's actually have like a discourse about this.
Yeah, I think I'm convinced now that Twitter feed is that way by design, because once you lose track of what you said 5 minutes ago, and then people expect you to remember it, they start calling you names. You're stupid. You don't remember. You're boomer. You're old. Like, oh my god,
you had a grammar mistake.
You got a grammar mistake. Get the hell out of here. I'm gonna remember about grammar when I'm like at it, when I'm like sucking your blood with my like trying to explain my point. But what seems to be a common sense and answer to my own question is that sometimes we all get distracted in the heat of moment. Like I said, I'm very passionate, very opinionated, right? But I think it all circles back to that Star Wars, it's all about people. The original saga would not be here if fans did not lift George Lucas and didn't buy his merchandise and didn't make it what it is today. It's all people. It's comprised of people. And this is what George has done throughout the years with prequels, with the original trilogy, with the Clone Wars. He tried to bring people together. And I think once you start reminding people, he's like, hey, like, come over here and just have a talk with us. Don't scream, don't shout. Tell us what's going on here. And once you're considerate of other people and their opinions, then once again, you diffuse them and you start saying as a moderator or a group owner, like, look, not everyone shares your worldview. You're not stating facts here. We're not talking about 2 + 2 math, right? You're sharing and expressing a point of view. Please, common sense. Your opinion shouldn't overshadow my opinion. At the end of the day, you and I can walk away from the conversation not learning anything, but also not being at each other's throat. My personal concept of a debate is Benjamin and Brian coming together with our own angles to try to arrive at a common consensus. If we're here to overshout each other and my point is to prove you wrong and walk away a victor, then I am an emotionally stunted 12-year-old trapped in a 40-year-old's body. Like, come on, really? Your priorities haven't changed in life that you have to prove a movie to somebody? Like, get real. Go outside, get some ice cream, enjoy life or something. Life doesn't revolve around Star Wars and cinema. Yes, it means a lot to us. We have shared memories with it. You have a deceased loved one that you used to watch it with. I get that part. I get the emotional component out of it. But also, other people have experienced that. Doesn't that amount to something? Like, other people love this stuff? And that's
for different reasons than you do.
And for different reasons than you do. And when you know what, I argue personally sometimes that I don't like... I'll be very direct here, guys, and not to offend anyone. I don't like token representation. If I'm not asking for Holocaust Jews to be represented in Star Wars directly or a narrative parallel, then I don't expect for yours to be there as well. It's like, is it a platform for me to scream and shout like, hey, I want my representation? That's my aspect of it. But people don't have to agree with me. I dislike when they put a gay character just for its own sake, just so Disney can like, check mark, we did it. Ha, enjoyed. We included that crowd. Like you said earlier, Hollywood always had an agenda. They need those ticket sales. They need to invite those people over and feel that they're safe there. I, as a heterosexual guy who prioritizes on good story first and everything else second, loved the heck out of the book Rising Storm, where it has a teenage gay boy who is infatuated with another boy, and he's a part of the story. I love this book. He's woven into the story. Remember the part that I'm mentioning when the fair is being attacked, and it's such a moment of despair, and he's looking for this other companionship and a safe shoulder because the other boy is older than him. That is the beauty of it. That is true misrepresentation. For me, the only thing that I argue hotly with people, and still I try to be elegant about it, is that don't put something in there for its own sake. Because when you politicize something for its own sake, and political talk is not in the story, like I always bring the Star Wars Next Generation transgender episode, where number one, Next Generation, yes, the number one, Jean-Luc Picard, first in command, he develops feeling for a genderless alien who wants to identify as a woman.
Star Trek, duh.
Star Trek,
Star Wars,
Star Trek, right? And this alien wants to self-identify as a single gender female, and it's taboo in their culture. And it's such a mature and nuanced conversation about transgenderism that we'll lose it. Once again, in this vitriol, in this kind of like, look, we're poster children of goodness, Disney. We're putting it... That's the only thing that pesters me a little bit. But
so actually, this is another Star Trek example. I'm not huge into Star Trek. I can't pretend like that I am.
Yeah.
But I remember going to see like the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies. And so when people talk, I would agree that like I'm Native American. A Native American is never going to be in a Star Wars film because it's maybe someone who is racially Native American, but there won't be a 1-to-1 comparison.
Right.
But yeah, like they're not going to input like Native Americans into a universe where Native Americans don't exist. But so back to my Star Trek example, I haven't seen anything as egregious as I did. I can't remember the name of that second J.J. Abrams movie. But what's the name of like Captain Sulu?
Sulu, yes. Japanese American.
In that second film, they arrive at the space station, and like they reveal that he's got a husband and they have 2 kids, and they stick on a shot of Kirk, like basically looking at the camera, going, "We did it." And I'm like, that's egregious as hell. But like a comic book like Dr. Aphra, they're never like winking and nodding to the audience to be like, see, we put a gay character in this. It's she just so happens to be homosexual.
Natural. It's organic.
It's organic. It's not like because I would agree, like it gets super cringy when they're like, look at us, we did the bare minimum, and like shouldn't everyone be super proud of us? It's like
it's a little annoyance, and I think if it wins the points for the community and a transgender person feels welcomed by that, who am I to talk about it? It's so minuscule, it's so tiny and insignificant. It's a start of war over this. But you know that now that you mentioned it, Native American, so Russians have also very close ties with the Native American cultures because the northeastern part of Russia is the descendants of modern, we should say, or middle-aged, Native Americans. A lot of cultures and ethnicities in northeastern Russia, if you look at their cultures and dances and music, you could say the progenitors, from totem poles to all of that, the eagle spirit mythology. I'm pretty sure you might be very well versed in it. But one character that I absolutely adore, that Tales of the Jedi is one of my all-time favorite Star Wars stories, Arkajeth. The way that they portray Ulik Keldroma as one of the protagonists of that story, his master looks decidedly Native American. You can't mistaken it for anything else. And when I grew up with that sort of culture as a Russian kid, like the Soviet Union was all about like the union and friendship of all the cultures, and we loved movies with Native Americans. A lot of them were made in Europe, and not in a very caricature kind of way. A lot of German movies cinema was made.
I was just about to say, Germans love Native Americans.
Yes. I'm trying to remember the actor's name, the Serbian actor. Oh my God.
I know exactly what you're talking about too, and I can't remember his name either.
He brought culture, he brought music, he brought tradition into his cinema that what a lot of Hollywood Westerners were not doing at the time, and Europeans were introduced to it in a completely different manner. Oh my God. I'm gonna have
to going to powwows and stuff like that these days. Well, a few years ago, you would see like lots of like randomly Europeans, like just a lot of like Germans or French people like at powwows. I'm like, what the hell? What is going on? I was like, you guys came all the way from Germany to come to this thing, like to the middle of nowhere. But but yeah, I would definitely agree. Like, go ahead.
Gojka Mitic. I got it. I
Oh,
remember
you found
Gojka Mitic. Yeah, I remembered it.
yeah, but I would definitely agree with like the if it feels like they're just putting a character in something.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about Finn. Is like they did that guy so dirty.
They
John
did him dirty.
Boyega.
Yeah.
He should have been a Jedi.
Yeah.
I would have loved if episode 8 was about like Finn and Poe both. Oh, all three of these characters are force sensitive, and they're the new Jedi Order, and Luke is training them.
Yeah.
That was like what I really wanted about episode 8.
Or Rose, she's such a gorgeous and talented young woman, and I loved seeing her. But then you turned her into this anime character that doesn't accomplish anything, and her non-love scene was so disturbing because the message is beautiful. Hey, let's not hate this. Let's fight what we love. I don't remember exactly how the phrase goes, but my dude, you're saying it in the heat of combat. This is a Star Wars movie. Exactly, it's not the time to say it. Take your boy to safety. If you have feelings there, you guys sort it out later on. It's a wars movie. It's almost like going back to Demolition Man with Wesley Snipes and Stallone, where like everything has become so desanitized. 20 years from now, they'll take the wars out of Star Wars and it'll be just like space encounters or something like that. Come on, it's a war film. The message is beautiful. The delivery could have been
I just love that scene so much because I remember when I was watching it in theaters and when it happened, I heard people go, what? Like they were like so confused because like John Boyega plays it. He's like, well, like he also he's like, where did this come from? Like it just seems to come out of left field.
Yeah.
Like that scene's hilarious to me. But I have like an appreciation for The Last Jedi now, I guess. I don't love it, but I can find the things in it that I really enjoy.
No, I loved that film. I recognize its flaws. To me, it was my favorite film since Return of the Jedi.
It's probably my favorite out of all the sequels, which I know that people view that as a problem, but Mark Hamill, you're not going to get a better performance out of it. Like that. It was just like a once in a generation performance from him.
Yeah, he killed
that movie. Like, oh god,
I felt it was Finn's moment of glory and would have been a very brave and bold move to kill one of the three lead characters in the mid film when he was about to make that sacrifice, and she subverts expectations and she takes us right out of that.
That's the hot phrase.
Yeah,
subverting expectations.
Exactly.
That really got memed into oblivion.
Brian, to start wrapping things up a little bit here, just a couple of more questions that I want to go over with you. The gatekeeper phenomenon, the need to prove everyone else wrong. And, what is fact versus opinion to you?
Yeah, it's like this is actually a conversation I was just having, like maybe an hour before we started recording was
right.
I had a fella who was saying he was using the dawn of the Jedi as an example, like one of my favorite comic series of all time by John Ostrander, excellent writer. But they were using him as an example, like his story as an example as to why the balance in the Force is blending of light side and dark side. I completely disagree with that. I think that the balance is the light side. Like I don't think the dark side is meant to be like corrupting, yada yada, whatever. He just has a different interpretation of that. But the way he was speaking about it was he was like, no, like what I am saying is literally fact. And I'm like, that can't literally be a fact because it's meant to be interpreted by different people in different ways. Like you realize that that's a subjective opinion you have. I definitely feel like there's a very weird phenomena in fandom in general where people are something is this or it's this. There's no space in between. So like, if you're gatekeeping, you're literally keeping new people out of a fandom to stop. I mean, like, just think about it this way. This is the way that I think about it is the sequel trilogies, despite how you feel about them, that's even a way to get people into the expanded universe. If they join a community and they're like, I like Disney canon. Like, hey, have you heard about Legends? You should go check this out. If you're stopping those people from getting into that fandom in the first place, all you're doing is you're harming Star Wars actively.
Yeah.
That's my opinion on it.
You basically read my mind there. I love how two fans from different generations can arrive at a certain conclusion and feel like we're not like in isolation going crazy. Like we're sharing it, something that should be common knowledge. It's like cinema is art. I also studied film. I have a BA degree in traditional animation from School of Visual Arts. I never pursued it as a career, but I studied film. Again, we're not saying here that, Brian and I have all the credit to say like we know better than you guys. It's just we are trained in the art form, and it has a form to it. But all cinema is, is art, and art is intended for interpretation. That its sole purpose to communicate ideas that different people can interpret. And the fact is that Vader does indeed grab the Emperor and throw him down the chute. That's you saw it. It's on screen. That's factual. Mm-hmm. What is Vader going through emotionally when he's looking from his son to the Emperor, and what goes in his mind, all that torment, is open for interpretation, is not factual. And yes, George Lucas, like any filmmaker, is notorious for taking the most popular interpretation and making it their own. Yes, that's exactly what I meant. Yes, Leia was always meant to be Luke's sister, despite that little kiss a movie ago. It's like
and there's 2 in that movie.
Right.
There's 2 kisses in that movie, which is very weird.
Yeah. But you get the gist of it. But then there's also this idea of, no, I need to communicate what I mean to you, Brian. Let me just educate you here a little bit, right? This concept of freedom of speech that, Star Wars fans love to argue that, we should be able to debate and say everything we feel about George Lucas's vision, how it failed a generation of fans. We should be able to talk about sequels, how Disney is not going in that right direction. And we understand that entitlement a little bit because, Star Wars belongs to all of us. We all have a say in it because we spent decades, in other examples, a whole lifetime living by its side, right? So I understand that a little bit. But where does the freedom of speech stop? Like, should you be able to say anything you can say?
I think that a lot of people's opinion on free speech is that I'm allowed to say what I want to say, but I don't want you to say anything back to me about it. So, I think that's people use that as an excuse to be like, well, I'm going to say whatever egregious stuff I want to say, and I get to state that as an absolute fact, and you don't get to respond to it or have like your own interpretation. Like your example of like Vader, like what he's going through in that situation. Like, I think that some people would use their free speech to go, this is what Vader was thinking, and if you think differently than me, then you're the worst person to ever live. It's like, that's not really what, I just think that it's a conversation back and forth. Like, if you're able to say something via free speech, I'm able to feel and say a certain thing back. I just think that people just need to quit being so mean to each other, which is like, that's such like a dumb, I understand, like that's like boiling it down to like its base. Hey, wouldn't it be nice if everyone was nice? But it's like,
and it's the same thing like with fandom, with people versus George Lucas, for example. To me, I don't know if you saw the documentary or not. People so misrepresented. It gave a voice to a generation of fans like myself who didn't have a social media outlet. And it deliberately shows you the first half of all that vitriol, of all of that toxicity and hate, and what it did to the actors' careers. But then the second half is people like myself who are fans who wanted to love these movies in theaters. You got to be a sociopath going into a movie with intent on hating on it. You want to love these movies, right? And because I personally felt let down, especially with The Phantom Menace, and it didn't have an outlet. And today, when fans are saying, look, I don't like what Disney is doing. This is not my Luke Skywalker. I understand that. I sympathize with that. And every time somebody expresses their opinion, well, this stuff, oh, no, you're just toxic. They're piled with that group because people are being tribal once again. People also need to be able to express themselves without feeling like they're walking on eggshells.
Yeah, I'm not big on the toxic positivity part of it. Like, if you're just being positive for the sake of being positive, there's a room for negativity and for there is such a good thing as like a good argument. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, that's something that everyone should be aware of. Like, if you're in a corner of the internet where it's like toxically positive, where people are just encouraging everything that you want to do because, oh, well, we're positively reinforcing you. Yeah. I view that as like a weird area of the internet. Like,
and you stunt art, you stunt Star Wars, and it's not going anywhere. If nobody can criticize what you're doing, if nobody can criticize what Kathy Kennedy's doing, can be criticized. Brian, I do have a couple of more questions for you. Do you mind if we hit pause for a second? Because I don't want to,
sure,
shorten those questions. I want us to have a full discussion. Thank you. All right, guys, we're back to it. And, you just mentioned this kind of like segueing into my next question. Should toxic fans, like the notorious Phantom Menace, be censored? When is innocent comments? When do innocent comments become harmful?
I mean, I think that you're definitely able to be critical of Star Wars, but I think that it's like just kind of common knowledge from most people that you should not be attacking like the actor. Because I mean,
Mhm.
we all see what happened to like Jake Lloyd,
Mhm.
and God, like Star Wars fans just like ruined that guy's life. But I think that the fandom menace, we're all aware of that like subgenre of fans and stuff like that. I think that any comments personally attacking or assaulting a specific person, like any organized like hate campaign,
Mhm.
that is bad. Like it's bad to like make somebody who is just acting out words that somebody else wrote,
Mhm.
like your it's like the classic, like the I can't remember the name of the actress who plays Cersei from Game of Thrones. Like people
Right.
legitimately disliking her as a person
Right.
for acting as like an objectively evil person.
Yeah.
So it's like I think that that's like the line is you can be a part of like you can say negative things about a Star Wars movie as long as you're not like going out of your way to like organize a hate campaign against somebody, or you're not like maliciously attacking somebody. And because like that, I mean, like it's difficult to people can say, oh, well, just don't look at it then. But it's like you can't function as a human being in this society without some form of social media. Like
Right.
if you're an actor, your studio wants you to have a social media presence.
Mhm.
And once you get to like a certain level of stardom, I'm sure you can go, I'm not doing that. I just don't want to. Like there are celebrities who aren't on Twitter. They don't have a Facebook. They don't have an Instagram. And, but not everyone's at that level where they're allowed essentially to do that. Um, I think that's like where I draw the line personally. Like if somebody was like just throwing a hate campaign against myself or against an actor or a director or whatever, like just because I didn't love episode 9 doesn't mean that I want JJ Abrams to like be
Yeah.
fired and never be allowed to work again. I think that's sort of where I draw my line personally.
Yeah, because it can become harmful, like we've seen it with these actors. And once again, this person that I got into on Twitter, like you said, toxic positivity, wanted to reinforce the idea that there was never any backlash from fans. All fans unanimously loved prequels, and the only people responsible for Jake Lloyd's, Ahmed Best's, and Hayden Christensen's ruined careers and lives are the media, the evil media. The prequels were always pristine. They're epicenter of George Lucas's vision, and they embody everything miraculous about Star Wars. Like there's no dialogue there. This person is right. I am just playing on my ego, what I actually want to do. And I said, well, hold on a second. Let's start remembering. Let's circle back a little bit here. Let me start a little campaign here, a poll across 20 different Star Wars groups. And let's ask fans what they remember about prequel era if they saw them in theaters, what their friends were saying. I can't put words in the mouth of people from 20 different groups.
Mm.
Naturally, people don't like to engage in that kind of like a post. They're more likely to choose their favorite character, focus on the book they like, or who versus who. Anyway, I got 7K views on it. People responded. Not in a single group anyone ever would refuse to acknowledge that a prequel trilogy was hated by fans. And I brought it back. I slapped it right into that person's face, and zero, nothing, nada. No conversation, no backwards, nothing. Because that person is not interested in a conversation. What she was interested in is exposing me because I'm a prequel hater who wants to justify to himself for loving Disney and shilling for them. Basically, I'm a psychopath.
Yeah,
Right?
it's
That's
very easy for people to like otherize somebody.
right,
Like
because
you're
that's
the
what you
enemy.
said.
Yes.
But I feel like places like RKO Outpost with Ryan and the little gentleman with like goatee is like, Disney, I have inside source told me this is happening. If you're misinforming fans, you don't belong on YouTube. Don't BS.
I mean, I will say that like that exact channel you're talking about, I actually really enjoyed his content back when he was making videos about Star Wars Legacy. Like he was making
Was he?
like
I tried to
like,
find
this was, like, a
reviews on his
long-
channel.
This was a long,
Oh.
long time. I'm talking like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
But now obviously those channels have become like what they are. And I'm in agreement that, I mean, like, yeah, sure, they can exist, but it's like you only exist to be overly negative.
You're
to just
leech.
to like,
Yeah, it's all reactionary. It's all performative.
Exactly.
It's not real. I don't believe for a second that that's who the guy is behind that persona. I don't know
Same.
him. I don't know Ryan. I quickly got to encounter him 25 seconds. He was in Matt Wilkins' stream. Matt Wilkins is a very small channel, but extremely knowledgeable guy about the expanded universe.
He's well known in the expanded universe
Right,
community.
right. And I
He's
love
like
him.
the
I
guy.
respect him so much. I respect him not turning his face to Disney, saying like, I don't want to experience that content. He was gracious enough to invite me to his live stream, and kind of like Ryan popped in and out. I didn't get the chance to, but I'm pretty sure if I talk to the person behind the screen, I'll encounter a fan. I'll encounter a real person with mature views on life. This is circus. This is getting views and getting likes and getting kids riled
It's a
up.
show.
It's a show, exactly. But it's harmful in a sense where now people come into my group, and it's not a contest. Here's thousands and hundreds of thousands of people coming in, and they're misinformed. Well, I heard Kathleen Kennedy is getting fired, and Dave Filoni will lead Star Wars interview. I'm like, I'm sorry to interrupt. Kathleen Kennedy has been fired every week for the past 6 years. She's still around.
Yep.
Yeah, it's now it's harmful. You're misinforming people. If you want to crap on something, that's your shtick. Do it all day. But just if you're misinforming people, and like you said, if you're directly attacking people for their hard work, for trying to do right by us, for the vision that they thought would be interesting, like Ryan Johnson, I will support his vision all the time, even though I disagree with a lot of points in that film. Leave it alone. Talk about the movie. Discredit or torch the characters. Like, this story doesn't make any sense here. It doesn't work. Like I just did with Rose. We're talking about a fictional character versus a person. If you can't make that distinction, you need to spend a little bit more time outside. That's me.
Yeah, I mean, like we were cracking open a few cans on the last Lego stream, and I went off like I was feeling a little loose at that point in time, so I like did like a whole parody of one of these like reactionary channels where it's just like you just said. Every day for the last 6 years, Kathleen Kennedy's been about to be thrown into a pit of lava. George Lucas is going to ride in, people have successfully implanted their political beliefs onto George Lucas, which is just insanity to me.
Yeah.
Like they have like this idea that he would agree with all their opinions, but in reality, he probably wouldn't want to be around those people.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think that like the misinformation of like what's going on at Lucas, it's insane for me to think that any of these people have any idea what's happening behind closed doors at a multi-billion-dollar corporation. It's like you don't have an inside source.
Yeah.
Like, don't stop lying. That's my whole thing.
That's
100%
why
I
just agree.
like not to like even report on that stuff on our channels, just because it's like it's only going to lead somewhere bad.
And guys, the reason that Brian is saying it, because obviously I and him have inside sources. We know stuff.
Obviously.
Right. Yeah. You guys,
we're both Disney shills. We're both getting those huge paychecks.
Thank you so much for joining me. I have one last question to summarize like our whole conversation. But Brian, you're more than welcome to my channel all the time. I don't expect to get paid from my amazing content and fan adorations anytime soon. I just love kicking it with real Star Wars fans, having real conversations like, hey man, I like this, I just like that, I wish this was a little bit better. Hey, are you looking forward to Kenobi? By the way, are you looking forward to Kenobi?
Oh hell yeah. Well, yeah, of course. Like I think it's insane that people aren't. People are already being negative about it. I'm just like, just wait for the show to come out first before then let's have a conversation about it.
Yeah. I hope that it's gonna do justice by prequel fans first and foremost, because it's bridging that gap. It's bridging the 90s and 2000s to that old stuff. There's going to be a lot of stuff for me to look in, like the original Kenobi performance and Lars Owen, blah, blah, blah. But it'll be interesting to see. I wish them the best. I hope this is a pivotal point where Star Wars doesn't feel like conveyor belt streamlined entertainment anymore. It feels special and grand again.
Yep.
Like, oh my God, dude.
I'm exactly that same frame of mind.
Yeah. Last question is, why is there a rise of podcasting? Like, do you prefer long form versus short form conversation, and why?
Okay, so earlier when we like first got on the Zoom call here, you were like, man, you're like, I popped into a stream. He was saying he liked my videos or whatever, and I was like, oh God, because I thought you were gonna. I'll just say it. I watch things in the shower. I'm one of those people that like it's like you can't. I like we're talking about like real life. It sucks. Like living in the real world and having to like pause your stimulation for even a second to like think about the real world woes that you may have. Why do that when you can just watch a YouTube video on your phone in the shower? So I listen to podcasts, I'll listen to music, I'll do whatever, like just while I'm showering. And so I will like listen to any long form podcasts while I'm in the shower brushing my teeth. You know what I mean? So I was watching some of your videos when I was in the shower.
Live goals, guys. Live goals.
Tipsy Brian admitted that out loud, and I was like, "Oh God, why did I say that?" But yeah, I'm huge on long form long form content. Like you had on Maggie reviews, correct?
Meg reviews, yeah. I invite her over, for chats.
Love her stuff on the New Jedi Order. Loved her conversation with you on your podcast. So I love long form content. I think that like I make short form content for YouTube, but like we like to do live streams and stuff like that to get people engaged, to like kind of flesh out more thoughts and to do stuff like that. I think that there's a little bit of that fandom that's lost, like in short form, bite-sized content. And so that's why like, I love your stuff. That's why like I hop into Star Wars on High's podcast, Star Wars series podcasts, whoever. It's just because I think it gives you a chance to like really hear people's opinions, for them to like, you know, change their opinion. If they're like, oh, I think this thing about this thing, but yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe this thing is like, it's because people like, regardless what they say, their opinions might change day to day. You know, they might be like, oh, I hate this thing about episode 8. Oh no, I actually like really like Luke's when he's he mentions Darth Sidious's name. He says Darth Sidious's name out loud in episode 8. Stuff like that. Love that stuff.
Thank you. It's the highest compliment in life when somebody listens to your podcast in the shower, guys. It's life goals accomplished there. What's the next step for me? Where do I go from this? You know, but Meg, she's such a delight. When I saw her channel, she was just like starting up early, and I think she had for a little longer than I did, but like so little views in the beginning. I'm like, people need to discover this. Come on. Exactly. And Matt Wilkins was inviting her. Anybody who encounters her stuff is like, she's amazing. She knows stuff. She's so detailed in her analysis. I'm like, oh my God, I wish I could do this stuff. And every time we're there, we're just kicking it off. Like that vibe, that energy is there. I know she's a fan. I know I'm a fan. She has a fresh perspective on the New Jedi Order. I've read it decades ago when it originally was coming out, and we're at it. We're analyzing, we're talking. And this is the best part of fandom, where people come in and they can share in nuance. They can be honest. They have like a heart-to-heart conversation, vent a little bit. Like, oh, there's this character. She always goes on about Jaina. That's like one of her favorite. Oh, Jaina did this over there and over here. I live for that stuff. Oh, yeah. I live to being able to hear an alternative point of view. That's why I have Josh. That's why I started with Josh, Star Wars on High, coming over, starting on my podcast, because I loved a prequel fan challenge me. And constantly,
he's like a big prequel guy.
Yeah, as years go by, more and more, I endearing myself more to those films, even though my perspective on the craftsmanship and cinematography will never change. It's there. It's been done. It's product of its time. Take it or leave it. I choose to take it because I am a Star Wars fan. Star Wars fan is the guy who picks up a book, reads it, and says, "Oh, this is garbage." Oh no, you know what? This is actually kind of cool. Yeah, you spend time and money.
Well, like you said, like. I've read Star Wars books and I'm like, didn't like that, but I wasn't like gonna go and you know try and.
Like, I didn't like Darth Plagueis, and James Luceno is one of my favorite writers, and I only finished half of the book. I know I need to go back about it before I do a review because I need to be honest about it. I need to be full about it. Anyway, Brian, this was our whole conversation here. I loved talking to you, man. Like I hope we can do this again if time permits. If you want to do this, please, by all time, I'll jump on your thing, you jump on my thing. However we choose to do it, sure. I'll delight in having this conversation. Please remind everyone where they can watch your channel, where people can see your Discord. I'll pop all the important links in the video regardless, but please just do those plugs.
Yeah, so we got our YouTube channel. We have a TikTok. Don't go look at the TikTok because we're not as good about updating it as we are with YouTube. We kind of forget that it exists sometimes. But yeah, so we got Barb's Basement on YouTube. We have a Discord. It's growing. We're trying to like formulate some of those things and make sure that that's a nice, smoothly running Discord. That's the hardest part about it, getting those set up. And on top of that, I am actually a part of the board for a fan convention that's going to be hopefully popping up in 2023 in Baltimore.
Mhm.
It's called the Jedi Conclave, Jedi Praxium. They have a podcast that I guest on sometimes called Praxi Chats. And I wanted to take this time to just very quickly shout out a couple of people that I think very, very positive communities. People should go check them out. Two Star Wars Nerds, excellent podcast. If you like people
I love their
who
stuff.
they have a nice, gentle conversation, they have very nice, relaxing voices, go check out Two Star Wars Nerds. Darth Matthews Holocron, excellent. Make sure you go. Like, if you're a Barb's Basement person and you're coming to look at Star Wars timeline stuff, subscribe. Barb will know if you don't. She will know if you do not subscribe. That's always my thing is we want to make sure that we're not like a massive channel by any means, but we want to elevate and help out any channel who is a positive, growing community and stuff like that. So make sure if you love fandom stuff, go check out all those places. I mean, just if you've heard of Barb's Basement, come check us out, sure. But the main thing I want you to take away is to go check out those other places too. Star Wars Transmissions, that's my last shout out.
Mhm.
Also another excellent YouTube channel. But
Can I add one more?
Yeah. Go
Meg's
ahead.
reviews, guys. If you
Meg's
want your legit book reviews, oh man, Star Wars Legends, Star Wars Canon, The High Republic, all of it. She will go through it. She connects the dots in a way that I'm like, Benjamin, start taking notes here. She knows what she's doing. She's so fun. Like, you guys could see that we have these conversations about New Jedi Order. But yeah, once again, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully we'll continue this. I'll pick an interesting topic for us to cover. Please go ahead and check out Brian's channel. Once again, all the links will be in the description below, in the actual video embedded as well, so you won't lose track of it. Anyway, this was all about that positive voice in Star Wars. We hope that you guys enjoyed it. Please support our channels, like, subscribe. We promise you're not going to get any literal misinformation from credible sources that we have close ties with Captain Kennedy. It's just two guys kicking it and having a good time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.